Hey everyone, I know that it's been a fortnight since I made another video talking about my thoughts on the game, but I figured with dawntrail being about halfway through its content cycle, and plenty of interviews talking about the future of the game constantly coming out, I should share my thoughts on what I think about Final Fantasy XIV, but from the perspective of someone who has never played any other MMO past the tutorial. In a sense, I still consider myself kind of a new player to the game. This is the only MMO where I've gotten to Endgame on content and I've gotten to do the raids in their prime before stronger gear comes out and makes some of the mechanics a joke. Honestly, I'd say I'm a pretty fast learner, as prior to dawntrail the only raiding experience I had was when I joined a static at the tail end of Endwalker that hard carried me through P9 and 10 to catch me up to their P11 prog. I don't recall how or why they let me join, but that was my introduction into raiding before the light heavy tier was released. I had never even used Party Finder for anything harder than extreme before that. Now here we are with dawntrail fully released, and I've completed both savage tiers, chaotic in the first 2 days, and was one of the first 500 people to beat Fork Tower, and I just recently formed a static to take on Fru after beating my first ultimate Garuda prog, Uwu, through Party Finder. My personal experience with 14 has been a blast, but even as I initially played through A Realm Reborn to Endwalker, if it wasn't for the story, I probably would have stopped playing, because even as a new player, I could tell that each dungeon was more or less a copy and paste of a wall-to-wall mob with 3 bosses in between. What kept me going was knowing I wanted to do the hardest fights in the game. That was my goal. I love doing level 1 challenges in Kingdom Hearts, and when games challenge you to use your kit to the fullest in order to win, it's one of the best feelings ever for me. One of my favorite memories of dawntrail is completing M6S in Party Finder with 2 of my friends. For days, we couldn't find any melee DPS that could do the ad phase correctly, and we ended up putting in the Party Finder description, "If summoner highest enmity, we disband." It actually kinda helped fix this problem, mostly, and we ended up eventually finding a group that could get past ad phase more than once. Once we all realized how lucky we were, we decided to stick together for the next 4 or so hours until around the 2 o'clock in the morning, when we finally decided that we needed to call it quits and sleep. We ended up adding each other and planned to meet up later on in the day, and we actually got the clear together. The encounter design for dawntrail has been a welcome update so far, and I feel as if I picked a great time to get into raiding. I've learned a lot from being an MSQ mainly player to evolving into a raider that does a little bit of everything in the game, and I have a lot to say. Starting off with the MSQ, I've heard a lot of people criticize specifically the pacing of dawntrail, saying it's terrible, but I have to be honest, I think the entire game has terrible story pacing. For me, almost every story took half the game to actually get interesting for me, except A Realm Reborn, which took until the very end. I still enjoyed them, I just wasn't heavily invested until whatever plot twist or event moved the story forward and things started to pick up. My issue with dawntrail's story are the same as the rest of the game's expansions, that there isn't enough engaging story content between reading lines of dialogue and finally getting to a dungeon or a trial. I did enjoy how the MSQ started to get more interesting with some slight puzzle solving and information finding, but it's one of those things where I'm glad that it was there, but I wish there was more and a lot earlier. I wish they had started dawntrail with that kind of story gameplay instead of ending with it. The story instances were a bit more interesting this time around, so if they can keep it up, I would love to see a few more spread throughout the game for players like me that enjoy a more engaging story, past reading tons and tons of dialogue. If they have to give an option to skip solo instances and go straight to whatever cutscene follows the end of the instance, I think that would be a pretty worthy sacrifice, if as long as there is a warning to prevent an accidental click. Moving on from the story, I want to talk about the content of the game as a whole. Like I said earlier, I've done everything from crafting to ultimate raiding, so pretty much anything that comes out will be interesting to me. And as I've said before, I've never played any other MMO longer than just a couple of hours, so I can't directly compare it to anything else, but I hear so many people say content updates are too slow and far between, with almost nothing to keep people going past running whatever content comes out the first week, only to never run it again. I agree and disagree with this statement. I can see it from another person's perspective why they feel that, But Yoshi P has already explained why this is the case with his candy analogy during the live letter and multiple interviews, sharing that his approach to fixing this problem is making content going forward to have a sort of scaling system or varying difficulties, rather than just the one that's too easy for hardcore players to enjoy or too hard for casual players to get into. Luckily, I am one of those players that enjoys all types of content, so for me, dawntrail has been a great experience. Everything that has been released I've enjoyed quite a bit, even if not everything released perfectly. Examples would be Chaotic with its insane required body checks that make progging a nightmare, and no normal fork tower mode along with instance prog being a thing, thankfully a thing of the past, even though a lot of people would argue it was fixed too late and should have never released that way to begin with. Despite some glaring design flaws, the content itself has been fun to complete for me though. As much as I still enjoy everything, even I can admit that there isn't enough rewards to keep people going sometimes. Take the new Field Ops Occult Crescent for example. This is something I was really looking forward to after doing Bozja mainly on my own, and not only getting a few relics but also getting all of the field notes to get my Final Fantasy XII hover bike. And when it came out, I was a bit torn. There were some parts that were great, like the Phantom Job system basically being pseudo subclasses, and the actual Fork Tower raid itself is one of the more fun pieces of content in the entire game for me. But these things are soured when you remember that most of the new rewards are actually items from older content that if they weren't dirt cheap on the market board already, they sure were when Occult Crescent came out, making most of the treasure you find feel more like trash than loot. The really cool thing about Bozja was that most of the common loot that you would get was completely unique to Bozja and tradable, keeping high value for those that want to farm simply to sell and those wanting to hoard for different occasions or to trade to friends who may need ones you have but they don't. In Occult Crescent, everyone gets the exact same loot no matter what you do, and it's all one-time use things or the same few glam items, giving no point in trading or hoarding loot other than the items you buy with gold and silver coins, which again, in Bozja you could do both. I know this is something Yoshi P has said that they would improve on with dawntrail, but honestly, this is one area I feel like that has had a lot of varying results. On the one hand, some things have stayed the same, like dungeons and extreme rewards, but some other areas have gotten better, like Chaotic giving more bonus loot based on how many first time clears have just happened, and having bonus timers, which is the only thing keeping the content even remotely alive, and the upcoming 14 Monster Hunter collab happening in a couple of days, getting a massive boost to the amount of rewards compared to the previous one. Oh, and even PvP bringing back some of the past rewards like the Cyber Watermelon mount that I was so sad that I missed out on. I'm not oblivious to the game's improvements when they happen, like other people in those that say the game is absolute trash and needs a complete overhaul in order to be fun. It baffles me that people actually think this. I get that the game doesn't do everything perfectly, but that is no different than any other game. Every game, MMO or otherwise, has its strengths and weaknesses, and for me, one of 14's strongest aspects has definitely been its raid content. As I said at the start of the video, I always knew that I wanted to be a raider ever since starting the game, and dawntrail was the perfect expansion for me to get into right as I started my raiding journey. I've said this before, but although I do find difficult raids fun, I also don't think harder raids inherently means more fun, and easier raids means not fun. I've heard the complaint that the first Arcadian tier was a huge letdown to a lot of people because of how easy the DPS check was, or rather a lack thereof, and the mechanics not being anything too crazy enough to break the mold, but I still found every single fight enjoyable. Each fight was memorable in their own way with catchy theme songs, voice lines, and a bunch of standout mechanics. This was only amplified in the next tier with things like Dancing Green Spotlight, Sugar Riot's ad phase, Brute Bomber keeping the Savage transitions from normal, which I heard a lot of people say wouldn't happen because past Savages usually remove them, and the sheer amount of fast mechanics with massive heal and mid checks in M8S. These fights were so fun to me that even after getting my weekly loot, I would go in with other roles just to learn all the other positions, to be more flexible when playing with friends or helping others learn the fight themselves. I understand most people don't want to go out of their way to help or do something again if they don't have to, and I'm not judging them for that, but it would be nice if, just like in Chaotic, you were rewarded for going out of your way to help others. This also feeds back into the reward system not being the best, since the only real reason to do Savage would be for your BIS or dyeable gear, which I honestly think shouldn't be gatekept behind difficult content. I'd rather you be able to augment normal raid gear and Savage have more of a flashy glowy version, or something completely unique. While I'm a sucker for cyberpunk type outfits, I will admit this current raid gear looks more like casual streetwear, which doesn't feel like something people would want to farm for. Which is a shame because I love glamming my character and enjoy farming my outfits myself instead of buying them straight off the market board, even when they're cheap. I'm hoping the final tier has something with a bit more effects on it, like what the mobile version got recently. That looks more like something I would have expected to see as raid gear for this current tier. All in all though, while I still enjoy the game and play it daily, I know a lot of people say that the game's content cycle is too slow, and because of how the game is currently designed to satisfy each type of player separately at different points in time, the game doesn't have enough content to keep a lot of people engaged, and I kinda do agree. At least with how things currently are. We'll see if the design changes and the upcoming 8.0 job rework are significant enough to keep players complaining about lack of content and homogenization engaged or not. Speaking of homogenization, the next thing I wanted to talk about was the job design. I just started playing Guild Wars 2 for the very first time, and it has helped me understand a bit more of the complaint, but just because I understand it doesn't mean that I completely agree that 14's job design is terrible. It's just different. You could argue that Guild Wars 2 job design is better than 14's and maybe even win, but at the end of the day, I know I'm playing two different MMOs and I play them for very different reasons. Sometimes those reasons overlap, like I enjoy raiding in 14 and I plan on at least trying raids in Guild Wars, but I know they are two different game designs with two different gameplay styles in mind. Even though I agree 14's combat can get stale and repetitive at times, I don't want it to be Guild Wars 2. I like and enjoy 14 for what it does, and I just want it to improve and get better. Like I said, I loved how phantom jobs were basically subclasses in disguise, and I would love to see that implemented in the base game, please. I loved being a time mage in Fork Tower, being able to slow the enemy's cast bar, have instant cast for 20 seconds on Pictomancer, and having a huge comet every 60 seconds, even on healers, really made what would have been just another piece of content feel a bit more refreshing and exciting. I'm a big fan of utility skills, and I hope this is something they take into account with the job rework next expansion. I just know I'm not expecting anything major like some others want, but that's not a bad thing. I already love what the game is, but I'm not opposed to some major shakeup to make the combat feel a little bit more dynamic. I think something like that is needed for a game that lasts this long. Things get stale if the game plays the exact same way for too long, and an extra GCD or two isn't enough for a lot of players that desire deep and interesting job design to dive into and experiment. I think the intent with this is that unlike other games where you only have one character learn one class compared to 14's one character can learn every class, they want you to main a role rather than a single class. For instance, if you main the melee role as a whole and not strictly a specific melee job, you could have a variety of options to take in each fight, depending on the encounter, since 3 of the melee classes share all the same gear with each other, as well as Viper and Ninja now, making it easier to swap between classes of the same role. Compared to something like Guild Wars 2, where you can have different builds with different armor stats that enhance either healing or DPS, allowing you to play the exact same job or profession in a different way depending on the fight. I have no idea what kind of plans they have in mind for the rework, but I've been very impressed with how the combat has at least improved in Dawntrail. And apart from a cult giving mostly trash loot from other content, the rewards have gotten better, and soon we will see their first attempt at making content for everyone with the Deep Dungeon Pilgrim's Traverse. All of this to say that I have some faith in them that the job rework will be significant enough to at least warrant calling it a rework in the first place. I wish Yoshi P in interviews had kept a bit more quiet about plans for the job rework, because everything he's been saying has done nothing but get the community riled up and angry over his vagueness, saying that those who like the combat the way it currently is have nothing to worry about as they want to add on to the current system. To a lot of players, this sounds like what we keep getting now, the same combat with a few new GCDs to spam off cooldown, but nothing that can completely change how a rotation plays in any significant way. On the other hand though, this sounds something similar to how Guild Wars 2 does things, where you get new specializations for each profession, and while your favorite playstyle may not always be the strongest in the highest end of content, You can still do most other content the same way you did years ago, adding to the current system while not changing anything about what people currently like. The main issue with this is people are so used to the 14 team playing things safe for so long that it's been hard for certain people to believe that anything is going to change at all, feeding into the negative reception that the game is currently facing about stale jobs and long patch cycles. It's why I wish Yoshi P hadn't said anything at all until he was ready to share actual details about the job rework, like if we'll stay in the 2-minute meta or if whatever new feature they add is only available and accessible in 8.0, or if it's something even players starting for the first time can experience. The high-end players will always play whatever is meta, and casual players will always play whatever they find the most fun, regardless if things change or not, but I think it's something 14 does actually need from time to time. I don't need things to be as insane as they were back in Heavensward. Something to make abilities like sleep feel less useless would be great. One of my biggest pet peeves with the game currently is how many abilities there are that only stay on your hotbar because of extremely niche circumstances, or not having them is more annoying than just letting it sit there till you get the one instance that actually requires it. Maybe that's more encounter design than job design, but it is very disappointing how many fights feel like the two teams aren't on the same page with each other. The game is in a very weird spot right now with a lot of changes coming soon. I just hope the changes don't completely break the game. I know people want jobs to feel as crazy different as the job professions in Guild Wars 2, but with the game and how the game's current encounter design is, I'm not sure if something like that is possible without players forcing the meta even harsher in something like Party Finder. Everyone would be forced to bring whatever spec does the most DPS, or risk getting called out by someone in chat when someone eventually realizes the caster brought their self-healing spec instead of their damaging one. Maybe with the game making its content difficulty more dynamic, this will be less of a problem, since more players will have other content to funnel themselves into, rather than jumping into something like Savage and Extreme to keep them busy. I haven't played enough MMOs to Endgame to compare it to, so a forced meta in high-end content might be something that is just normal in games like this. If you would like to let me know about this, please tell me in the comments, as I'd like to know more on how other games handle this, if at all. I would assume other games just have so much more mid-core type content like field operations, but perhaps a lot more in depth and on a grander scale to keep the casuals and mid-core players busy that they never need to step foot in the harder raids. I've seen a lot of comments say they wish field ops were the entire game to make the game feel more alive, and even before Cult Cressy was released, everyone was complaining about how long it took, so I know I'm not completely insane for thinking this. Personally, I think field operations should be something they focus on more, and each expansion should start and end with a field ops update. They could make the zones bigger, and even allow crafters and gatherers to have some reason to want to be there. There could be a crafting system completely unique to it, similar to how Cosmos crafting and gathering works, and you can mix and match different materials to get different effects that only affect the content in field operations. This isn't completely out of the realm of possibility when you consider, well, 1, they did it in Boja, and 2, Yoshi P's candy statement, making less overall unique content, but providing more ways to play the content that we do have, making content easier to get into for players of all skill levels, meaning they can focus more on making something like field operations the main reason to play 14. It's the perfect way to get hardcore combat-heavy players that want to do big damage and casual players that only want the rewards playing together and helping each other out. So much content in the game has these two separated, and the few times they are mixed together, it's short-lived because the design team is spread thin trying to make content and rewards for each type of player instead of just one huge giant content that pleases all players. I still want them to experiment and bring new content ideas to the game, as long as the quantity doesn't sacrifice the quality. To close this video off, I just want to say I still enjoy the game very much and don't plan on stopping anytime soon. Even with the little time I've played in Guild Wars 2, there are plenty of things I don't like about it that I feel 14 does way better. No game is perfect and 14 is far from it, but no game needs to completely copy another to be successful or fun. A lot of people enjoy 14 for what it is, and no, not just LEGO people that think everything is fine and nothing is ever wrong with the game. It truly astonishes me how many people refuse to be reasonable on this subject. Yes, there are plenty of people out there that will never say anything bad about their favorite game, and defend it from any and all critique, but there are also people that will over-exaggerate every single problem and refuse to believe that anyone with a brain can have fun with something just because they happen to not. The classic, if I don't like it, you shouldn't like it either mindset. There are plenty of extremes on both sides, and I wanted to try my best to be a sort of middle ground when it comes to discussing aspects of the game. A lot of the time, I will hear complaints from creators comparing 14 to whatever game they feel is better, without realizing that even the game they love has glaring issues as well. Those issues just don't bother them because it happens to not affect their subjective enjoyment of the game. And for some reason, saying the game is fun is the same as saying the game is perfect. It's not. As I've explained in this video, the game could improve in a lot of areas, but nothing about the game as a whole needs to completely change, just be enhanced. Anyways, thank you for listening to me ramble for a bit and share my thoughts on this subject. I've been playing a lot of Guild Wars, as I mentioned multiple times in the video, and plan on it being the second ever MMO I make it to the endgame and hopefully do raids with. So if you'd like to see that journey, feel free to follow me over at twitch.tv/Illyria, and you can follow me and my friends around as we make our way through the game. Meeting new people in MMOs is one of my favorite things, so don't be afraid to show your face around there if you're looking for some fresh players to help out. Like and subscribe to the channel as well so you can stay updated when I put out another new video. See you next week for patch 7.35.